12. Amend. The subsidiary motion to amend is a motion to modify the wording, and within certain limits the meaning, of a pending motion before the pending motion itself is acted upon. Less frequently, it may become desirable to apply a similar process to something already adopted, as bylaws, a program, or a resolution. It should be noted that the motion then used is not the subsidiary motion to amend, but a main motion having particular characteristics. This section deals only with amend as a subsidiary motion. For the motion to amend something previously adopted, see Chapter 35. Amend is probably the most widely used of the subsidiary motions, although the full procedure for its most effective application is not generally well understood by the meeting-going public at large. The ordinary members becoming at home with the formal amendment process is the keystone of the power of the general membership to keep details of the direction of an organization under its control to the extent it wishes to do so. To understand how the process works, it is important to realize that when an assembly takes action, all it ever actually does itself is to adopt a statement, directing that a certain action be carried out or expressing a certain view or aspiration. The precise wording of the statement can become crucial when it deals, for example, with a complex matter or an expressed position on a publicly controversial issue. To enable an assembly to work through internal disagreements about the precise wording of a statement in an orderly manner, the rules governing the subsidiary motion to amend include extensive detailed specifications stating the type of change in language structure through which modifications are to be achieved. Adoption of a subsidiary motion to amend does not adopt the motion thereby amended. That motion remains pending in its modified form. Rejection of a motion to amend leaves the pending motion worded as it was before the amendment was voted on. Neither the member who offers an amendment nor the maker of the main motion amends or makes an amendment. Only the assembly can do that. A member's vote on an amendment does not obligate him to vote in a particular way on the motion to which the amendment applies. He is free to vote as he pleases on the main motion, whether it is amended or not. An amendment must always be germane, that is, closely related to or having bearing on the subject of the motion to be amended. This means that no new subject can be introduced under pretext of being an amendment. See 1216 through 21. Standard descriptive characteristics. The subsidiary motion to amend, 1a, when applied to a main motion, it takes precedence over the main motion and over the subsidiary motion to postpone indefinitely. It yields to all subsidiary motions other than postpone indefinitely and amend, and it also yields to a motion to amend that is applied to it, and it yields to all privileged motions and all applicable incidental motions. B, when applied to other than a main motion, it takes precedence over the motion that it proposes to amend. It yields to any privileged or subsidiary motion other than amend, to which the motion that it proposes to amend would yield, and it also yields to motion to amend, to limit or extend limits of debate, and for the previous question that are applied to it, and it yields to all applicable incidental motions. 2, can be applied to any main motion, but in the case of some incidental main motions, only in a limited manner. Also can be applied in different limited ways to any other motion that legitimately contains a variable factor. For example, can be applied to change the duration of a proposed recess or the hour to which a pending question is to be postponed. For lists of motions that cannot be amended, see pages T46 through T47. Amend can be applied to itself, that is, to pending primary amendments, that is, secondary amendment. Note, secondary amendments must not be confused with secondary motion, a much more general concept explained in 5.3 and following. Back to reading. Or amendment to an amendment will result, but it cannot be applied to a secondary amendment. See Standard Characteristic 6 below and Degrees of Amendment 1211 through 13. The section in this book dealing with each individual motion contained under Standard Characteristic 6 a statement of whether amend is applicable to that particular motion, and if applicability is limited, in what manner. Motions to limit or extend limits of debate and for the previous question can be applied to a pending primary amendment or secondary amendment, and these motions affect only the immediately pending amendment unless otherwise specified. A division of a question can be applied to the motion to amend. The motion for consideration by paragraph or seriatim can also be applied to it. The motion to amend cannot have motions to commit, postpone definitely, or lay on the table applied to it alone, but when a primary amendment or a primary and secondary amendment are pending, the main question can be committed, postponed, or laid on the table, and the amendments then undergo the same process with the main motion. The motion to amend cannot be postponed indefinitely. 3 is out of order when another has the floor. 4 must be seconded. 5 is debatable whenever the motion to which it applies is debatable. Such debate must be confined to the desirability of the amendment, however, and must not extend to the merits of the motion to be amended, except as may be necessary to determine whether the amendment is advisable. Amend is undebatable whenever the motion to be amended is undebatable, but see 4331 through 32 regarding allowable explanation of an undebatable motion. 6 is generally amendable. This characteristic, however, creates 2 degrees of amendment, primary and secondary, and a secondary amendment cannot be amended. See Degrees of Amendment 1211 through 13. 7 requires a majority vote, regardless of the vote required to adopt the question to be amended. This is true even in cases where adoption of the amendment would result in changing the vote required to adopt the question being amended, as from a 2/3 vote to a majority vote or vice versa. C, for example, standard characteristic 7 if postponed to a certain time, 14.4, and the example in 14.21. 8 can be reconsidered. Further rules and explanation with forms. Classification as to form. There are 3 basic processes of amendment, the third of which is an indivisible combination of the first 2. For each of these processes, some of the rules are different depending on whether it is applied with reference to a few words or to a whole paragraph or section, so that each process has 2 forms, as to follow. 1. The first process, to insert or to add. A, to insert words, or if they are placed at the end of the sentence or passage being amended, to add words, or B, to insert a paragraph, or if it is placed at the end, to add a paragraph. 2. Second process, to strike out. Note, it should be noted that the application of the word delete to any form of amendment is not a preferred parliamentary usage, but the shortened expression to strike is acceptable. A, to strike out words, or B, to strike out a paragraph. 3. Third process, an indivisible combination of processes 1 and 2 having the following forms. A, to strike out and insert, which applies to words, or B, to substitute. That is, in effect, strike out a paragraph or the entire text of a resolution or main motion and insert another in its place. Note, a motion to strike out a paragraph in one place and insert it in a different place is also possible. Such a motion is not a motion to substitute. It is similar to the second of the 2 types of motions to strike out and insert, applying to words, discussed in 1258 through 59. The wording of the paragraph cannot be materially amended by a motion of this type or by any secondary amendments to it. However, once such a motion has been adopted, the transferred paragraph may be amended by any of the usual forms. Back to reading. Note that substitute is a technical parliamentary term that is not applied to anything less than a complete paragraph of 1 or more sentences, so that this term is not applicable to Form 3A. Forms 1A, 2A, and 3A relating to words can be applied to change the wording within a single sentence, or occasionally within 2 or more consecutive sentences that make a part of a single paragraph. Forms 1B, 2B, and 3B relating to a paragraph can also be applied to a section, article, or larger unit. The rules for each of the different forms of amendment are given in separate subsections beginning in 1224. Degrees of amendment. As noted in standard characteristics 2 and 6 above, a subsidiary motion to amend can in general be amended so that 2 degrees of amendment, primary and secondary, are possible. A primary amendment applies directly to the pending resolution, main motion, or other motion, except amend, to be amended. A secondary amendment applies to a pending primary amendment. It proposes a change in the primary amendment, or in certain cases, in a paragraph that the primary amendment proposes to strike out of the pending resolution or motion. See 1251 and 1270. The terms amendment of the first degree and amendment of the second degree, or amendment to the main question and amendment to the amendment, are correct expressions, but the terms primary amendment and secondary amendment are preferred. An amendment of the third degree is not permitted. To accomplish this same purpose, a member can say, while a secondary amendment is pending, that if it is voted down, he will offer another secondary amendment, which he can then indicate briefly in its place. Except as described under the next 2 headings, no more than 1 primary amendment and 1 secondary amendment are permitted to be pending at a time, but any number of each can be considered in succession, so long as they do not again raise questions already decided during the same session. See filling blanks, 1292 through 113, however, for a special method of amending highly variable factors, such as times, amounts, names, or numbers, by which several alternative proposals can be pending at the same time. Series of amendments offered by a single motion. A series of amendments to a pending main motion or to a lengthy primary amendment, such as a substitute, may be offered in one subsidiary motion to amend. Unless these amendments meet the standard for conforming amendments described immediately below, any member may demand a separate vote on one or more of them. After the others have been voted on together, the amendment or amendments on which separate votes are requested are disposed of. For application of this method to amendments recommended by a committee to which a resolution has been referred, see 5145 through 48. Conforming amendments. Sometimes several changes throughout a motion or resolution are needed in order to achieve one end, in which case these separate amendments are proposed and adopted by a single subsidiary motion to amend. For example, suppose a lengthy resolution is pending relating to the creation of a new standing committee called the Ways and Means Committee to study and make recommendations concerning the society's financial circumstances and requirements, and this committee is referred to by name in a number of places scattered throughout the resolution. If it is desired to change the name of this committee from Ways and Means Committee to Finance Committee, it is both necessary and in order to move to amend the pending resolution by striking out Ways and Means Committee wherever it appears and inserting Finance Committee in lieu thereof. In such cases, where all of the individual amendments must be made if any one of them is made in order to leave a coherent resolution pending, if the motion to amend is adopted, the proposed amendments are offered in a single motion, as in the example given. Such proposed amendments may not be divided. Determining the germaneness of an amendment. As already stated, an amendment must be germane to be in order. To be germane, an amendment must in some way involve the same question that is raised by the motion to which it is applied. When a secondary amendment proposes a change to the primary amendment, it must be germane to that primary amendment, not just to the motion that the primary amendment would change. When a secondary amendment proposes a change in a paragraph the primary amendment proposes to strike out, either by a motion to strike out a paragraph or by a motion to substitute, it must be germane to that paragraph. An amendment cannot introduce an independent question, but an amendment can be hostile to or even defeat the spirit of the original motion and still be germane. Aside from these principles, there is no single all-inclusive test for determining when a proposed amendment is germane and when it is not. A method by which the germaneness of an amendment can often be verified, however, grows out of the following general rules of parliamentary law. 1. During the session in which the Assembly has decided to question another main motion raising the same or substantially the same question cannot be introduced. 2. While a motion has been temporarily disposed of, as explained in 9, 7 through 11, no other motion can be admitted that might conflict with one of the possible final decisions on the first motion. By these rules, if a proposed amendment is related to the main motion in such a way that, after the adoption, rejection, or temporary disposal of the present main motion, the essential idea of the amendment could not be introduced as an independent resolution during the same session, the amendment is germane and must be admitted, since there will not or may not be an opportunity to present it later. This test cannot be reliably used to determine that an amendment is not in order, since it is sometimes possible for an amendment to be germane, even if, regardless of action on the present main motion, the idea embodied in the amendment could be introduced independently later in the same session. As an example of a germane amendment, assume that a motion is pending that the Society authorize the purchase of a new desk for the Secretary. It would be germane and in order to amend by inserting after desk the words and matching chair, since both relate to providing the Secretary with the necessary furniture. On the other hand, amendment to add the motion to the words and the payment of the President's expenses to the State Convention is not germane. Or assume that the following is the pending motion: that the City Council commend Officer George for his action in, and meant to strike out commend and insert censure, although antagonistic to the original intent, is germane and in order, because both ideas deal with the Council's opinion of the officer's action. Also, since the motion to censure the officer for the same act could not be introduced independently in the same session after the adoption of a motion to commend him, the amendment to change commend to censure is germane under the rule given above. It should be noted that censure is different from not commend. See improper amendments below. There are borderline cases where a presiding officer will find it difficult to judge the germaneness of an amendment. Whenever in doubt, he should admit the amendment, or in important cases refer the decision to the Assembly. The chair is in doubt and will ask the Assembly to decide whether the amendment is germane. Debate, if any, provided that debate is in order. The question is on whether the amendment is germane to the resolution or to the primary amendment. Those of the opinion that the amendment is germane say aye. Those of the opinion that it is not germane say no, etc. See also example under point of order 23:18 through 20. Improper amendments. The following types of amendment are not in order. One that is not germane to the question to be amended. One that merely makes the adoption of the amended question equivalent to a rejection of the original motion. Thus, in the motion that our delegates be instructed to vote in favor of the increase in Federation dues, an amendment to insert not before B is not in order because an affirmative vote on not giving a certain instruction is identical with a negative vote on giving the same instruction. But it would be in order to move to insert not before 2, instructed not to vote in favor, since this would change the main motion into one to give different instructions. 3, one that would cause the question as amended to not be in order. For an exception, see 1247. 4, one that proposes to change one of the forms of amendment listed in 12.8 to another form. A pending primary amendment to strike out oak before furniture, for example, cannot be converted into the form strike out and insert by moving to add and insert maple. 5, one that would have the effect of converting one parliamentary motion into another. For instance, a motion to postpone the question until 2 p.m. cannot be amended by moving to strike out until 2 p.m. and inserting indefinitely, since that would convert it into a different kind of motion. 6, one that strikes out the word resolved or other enacting words. Note on amendment of the preamble. When a resolution has a preamble, one or more clauses beginning whereas, the preamble is not open to amendment until after amendment of the resolving clauses has been completed. After any amendment of the preamble, a single vote is taken on the question of adopting the entire resolution or paper. See also 28.7. Rules for the different forms of amendment. Because amendment can be moved in different forms, rules pertaining to each form of the motion are given separately below, with examples. The general guidelines for consideration of primary and secondary amendments are presented under form and example 1A, 1B, 1232 through 45, are applicable also to the other forms. It should be noted that many of the rules governing the different forms of amendment are particular applications of the following principle. After the Assembly has voted that certain words or a certain paragraph shall or shall not form part of a pending resolution, it is not in order during the same session at which that vote was taken to make another motion to amend that raises the same question of content and effect. Common sense should guide the presiding officer in interpreting the rules, both to give freedom for improvement on the main motion finally to be voted on, and at the same time to protect the Assembly from motions for amendment that present questions it has already decided. 1a. To insert or to add words. A motion to insert words must specify the exact place of insertion by naming the word before or after which, or the words between which, the insertion is to be made, whichever will better locate and point out the effect of the change. For longer printed copies, the line number and paragraph number should be designated. In the consideration of motion to insert certain words, or if they are to be placed at the end of the passage before being amended, to add certain words, any necessary perfecting of the new word should be done by secondary amendment before the vote is taken on inserting or adding as proposed by the primary amendment. Otherwise, there may be no opportunity to perfect the inserted or added words, for reasons explained in the next paragraph. After words have been inserted or added, they cannot be changed or struck out during the same session, except through reconsideration of the vote. See Chapter 37, or through an amendment presenting a new question in the form of a motion. 1. To strike out the entire paragraph into which the words were inserted. 2. To strike out a portion of the paragraph, including all or a part of the words inserted, and enough other words to make a different question from the one decided by the insertion. 3. To substitute an entire paragraph for the one into which the words were inserted. 4. To strike out a portion of the paragraph, including all or part of the words inserted, and insert other words in a way that presents a new question. If a motion to insert certain words in a particular place is voted down, it is still in order, provided that it will present an essentially new question to make a motion. 1. To insert only or part of the same words. 2. To insert all or a part of the same words together with some others. 3. To insert the same words in place of others, motion to strike out and insert. 4. To insert the same words in another place where the effect will be different. A motion to insert or to add words can have applied to its secondary amendments in any of the three forms relating to words: inserting or adding, striking out, or striking out and inserting. 1b. To insert or to add a paragraph. The rules for the insertion or addition of a paragraph are essentially the same as those given above, except that after a paragraph has been inserted, words can still be added to it, that is, placed at the end of the paragraph only, provided that they do not conflict with or modify anything in the paragraph as already inserted. When a paragraph is to be inserted or added, any necessary perfecting should first be done by secondary amendments. After its insertion or addition, the paragraph cannot be struck out except in connection with other paragraphs that make the question materially different. If a motion to insert or add a paragraph is voted down, its rejection does not preclude any other motion except one that presents essentially the same question. If a rejected paragraph is rewritten or shortened in such a way that its effect is changed, it becomes a different paragraph under the rules for amendment. Form an example for 1a and 1b to insert or to add words or a paragraph. Typical forms in which a motion to insert or to add may be made are: I move to amend the resolution by inserting the word waterfront before the word property. I move to insert plus expenses after $100. I move to insert permanent between all and employees. I move to insert in line 5 of the second paragraph the word preferred before stocks. I move to insert after paragraph 3 the following paragraph. I move to amend by adding the words at a cost not to exceed $2,000. I move to add the following paragraph. In stating the question on each motion in any series involving amendments, and again when putting the motion to a vote, the chair should take care that the members understand which motion is under immediate consideration, as well as the effect of adopting or rejecting it. Therefore, when stating the question on an amendment, the chair may find it advisable to employ 3 steps. 1. State the question as for any other motion. It is moved and seconded to. 2. Read the main motion or the portion affected by the amendment as it would stand if the amendment were adopted. If the amendment is adopted, the main motion will read. 3. Make clear once more that it is the amendment that is under immediate consideration. The question is on. Assume that the main motion, that the society purchase the property adjoining the present headquarters, is pending. Member A, obtaining the floor. I move to add the words and convert it into a parking lot. Second. Chair. It is moved and seconded to add the words and convert it into a parking lot. If the amendment is adopted, the main motion will read that the society purchase the property adjoining the present headquarters and convert it into a parking lot. The question is on adding the words and convert it into a parking lot. Similarly, when putting to a vote the question on an amendment, if debate or consideration of other motions has intervened since the amendment was stated, the chair may find it advisable to employ a comparable set of 3 steps. 1. Repeat the amendment. The question is on. 2. Read the main motion or the portion affected by the amendment as it would stand if the amendment were adopted. If the amendment is adopted, the main motion will read. 3. Take the vote in such a way as to make clear it is the amendment that is to be voted on. Those in favor of, say aye. Those opposed, say no. Chair. The question is on adding the words and convert it into a parking lot. If the amendment is adopted, the main motion will read that the society purchase the property adjoining the present headquarters and convert it into a parking lot. Those in favor of adding the words and convert it into a parking lot say aye. Those opposed say no. After taking the vote, the chair announces the result of the vote on the amendment and then states the question that consequently becomes immediately pending. The ayes have it and the amendment is adopted. The question is now on the main motion as amended that the society purchase the property adjoining the present headquarters and convert it into a parking lot. Should the amendment fail, the chair is announced and the result would be as follows. Chair. The ayes have it and the amendment is lost. The question is now on the main motion that the society purchase the property adjoining the present headquarters. At this point, regardless of whether the amendment is adopted or rejected, the resolution is again open to debate, and it is in order to offer a different amendment. In some cases, depending on the length of the resolution and the amendment, the nature of the subject matter, the conditions of the assembly, etc., the question may be clear to the members if the chair states only the amendment, rather than employing the 3 steps outlined above. On the other hand, in circumstances of particular complexity, when confusion is otherwise likely, the chair may find it advisable to employ 4 steps. First, to reread the entire main motion or resolution, or the paragraph or portion that the amendment would affect. Second, to read the proposed amendment. Third, to read the motion, resolution, or affected portion as it would stand if the amendment were adopted. And fourth, to make it clear once more that it is the amendment that is to be voted on. As an example of secondary amendment by inserting, assume that there are pending 1. A resolution resolve that the society purchase the property adjoining the present headquarters, and 2. Immediately pending, a primary amendment to add the words and convert it into a parking lot. Details as to the probable cost of proposed phases of the project are soon to be known. Member X obtained the floor. I move to insert in the pending amendment the word landscaped before parking lot. Second. It is moved and seconded to amend by inserting in the primary amendment the word landscape before parking lot. If the word is inserted, the primary amendment will be to add to the resolution for the purchase of the property the words and convert it into a landscaped parking lot. The question is on inserting the word landscaped. It should be noted that in the preceding example, the chair gives the primary amendment as it would read if the secondary amendment were adopted. Debate, if any, must be confined to the issue if the conversion to a parking lot is to be included in the project at this time. Should the lot be landscaped? When this debate has ended, a chair puts the secondary amendment to a vote, announces the result, and states the question before the assembly, as follows. The question is on inserting in the primary amendment the word landscape before parking lot. If the word is inserted, the primary amendment will be to add to the resolution for the purchase of the adjoining property the words and convert it into a landscaped parking lot. It should be noted that this vote will not decide whether a parking lot is to be part of the project. This vote will determine only whether the parking lot will be landscaped if it is constructed. A vote of aye is for landscaping, a vote of no is against landscaping. Those in favor of inserting the word landscaped in the amendment say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it and the word is inserted. The question is now on the primary amendment as amended, which is to add to the resolution the words and convert it into a landscape parking lot. If the amendment is adopted, the resolution will read, resolve that the society purchase the property adjoining the present headquarters and convert it into a landscape parking lot. Adoption of this amendment will mean that if the property is purchased by the society, there will be a parking lot, which will be landscaped. The question is on the amendment. Debate and voting on the question proceed as described above. Amendments are sometimes so simple or acceptable that they may be adopted by unanimous consent. See 458 through 63. For example, assume that while the main motion is pending that the Properties Committee be directed to secure estimates for the necessary building repairs, a member moves to amend by inserting the words at least 3 before estimates. If the chair senses that there is general approval, he may say if there is no objection, the words at least 3 will be inserted. The wording would then be to secure at least 3 estimates. Since there is no objection, the words are inserted. 2A, to strike out words. A motion to strike out words must specify their location when it is not otherwise clear. When a motion to strike out certain words is made, it can be applied only to consecutive words, but the words to be struck out may become separated as a result of a secondary amendment, in which case the primary amendment is voted on in a form in which it could not have been moved directly. To strike out separated words, the best method is to make a motion to strike out the entire clause or sentence containing the separated words and insert a new clause or sentence as desired. Separated words can also be struck out by separate motions or as part of a series of amendments offered in one motion. See 1214. If a motion to strike out certain words is adopted, the same words cannot be inserted again during the same session unless the place of the wording is so changed as to make a new proposition. If a motion to strike out certain words fails, it is still in order, subject to the requirement that the words involved must be consecutive, to move 1, to strike out only a part of the same words, 2, to strike out all or a part of the same words together with some others, 3, to strike out all or a part of the same words and insert different ones, 4, to strike out all or a part of the same words together with some others and insert different words. It is important to note that the motion to amend by striking out certain words can be amended only by striking out words from the primary amendment. The effect of such a secondary amendment is that words struck out of the primary amendment will remain in the main motion regardless of whether the primary amendment is adopted or rejected. For example, assume that the following are pending. 1. A main motion directing the Secretary to write to Congressman Altman, Brock, Crowley, Davidson, and Edwards. 2. A primary amendment to strike out Brock, Crowley, Davidson, and 3. A secondary amendment to strike out Crowley from the primary amendment. If the secondary amendment is adopted, the primary amendment then becomes to strike out Brock and Davidson from the main motion, so that Crowley's name will remain in the main motion regardless of the outcome on the vote on the primary amendment, which no longer affects him. As a consequence of the rule stated at the beginning of this paragraph, a primary amendment to strike out a single word cannot be amended. When a motion is made to strike out a sentence that might desirably be retained with some changes, the form of secondary amendment allowed for motions to strike out certain words may not be readily applicable. In such a case, a member can say in debate on the primary amendment that he believes the sentence should be reworded in a way which he can then state, and that the motion to strike out the present sentence is adopted, he will move to insert his new version. If the motion to strike out is lost, he can also move to strike out the present sentence and insert his new version. 2b. Strike out a paragraph. There is an essential difference between the motion to strike out a paragraph and the motion to strike out certain words, which lies in the rules of the effect of the secondary amendment. When it is moved to strike out an entire paragraph, the paragraph that would be struck out is open to improvement by secondary amendment in any of the 3 forms relating to words, inserting or adding, striking out and inserting, before the vote is taken on the primary amendment. If the primary amendment to strike out is voted down, the paragraph then remains in the resolution with any changes that were made by the secondary amendment. The following differences in the effect of a secondary amendment to strike out, dependent on whether the primary amendment to strike out involves only certain words or a paragraph, should be particularly noted. If the primary amendment is to strike out certain words, then words struck out of the primary amendment will remain in the resolution regardless of the final vote on the primary amendment, as explained above. But if the primary amendment is to strike out a paragraph, then words struck out of that paragraph in the process of secondary amendment are out of the resolution regardless of the final vote on the primary amendment. After a paragraph has been struck out, it cannot be inserted again unless the wording, or possibly the place, is changed in a way that presents an essentially new question. After a motion to strike out a particular paragraph has been voted down, any amendment presenting a materially new question involving the same paragraph or any part of it is still in order. Form an example 2a and 2b to strike out words or a paragraph. The motion to strike out may be made in forms such as I move to strike out the word concrete before pavement in line 5, or I move to strike out the third paragraph of the platform statement. Variations similar to those given for inserting or adding 1232 are applicable. Assume that the following main motion is pending: that the bowling league establish a division open to the juniors and seniors of Southwood High School. Member A obtaining the floor. I move to amend by striking out the words juniors and. Second. Chair. It is moved and seconded to amend by striking out the words juniors and. If the amendment is adopted, the main motion will be to establish a division open to the seniors of Southwood High School. The question is on striking out the words juniors and. From this point, the procedure is similar to that already illustrated for inserting and adding. 3a. To strike out and insert, applying to words. The motion to strike out and insert is especially applicable in situations where it may be impossible to secure the desired result without making the act of striking out inseparable from that of inserting, as may happen if some members are unwilling to vote for the one unless assured of the other. The 2 parts of this motion cannot be separated, either by secondary amendment or by a division of a question. To avoid confusion with the former amendment known as substitute, 1269 through 90, which applies to paragraphs or longer elements, the word substitute should not be used in connection with the motion to strike out and insert, which applies only to words. Motions to strike out and insert fall into 2 types: those by which a different wording is inserted in the same place, and those by which the same wording struck out of one place is to be inserted in a different place. The two parts of the motion to strike out and insert must not represent two independent questions unless the mover receives unanimous consent to make such a combined motion. Rather, the two parts must be germane to each other. Thus, in motions of the first type mentioned in the previous paragraph to strike words out of and insert words into the same place, the words to be inserted must in some way be related to or address the same issue as the words to be struck out. And in motions of the second type, to strike words out of one place and insert words into a different place, the words to be inserted must not be materially different from the words to be struck out. The first type of the motion to strike out and insert, the kind that proposes to insert a different wording in the same place, is perhaps more common. When such a primary amendment is offered, the chair states the question on it and lets debate of its merits begin in the usual way. For purpose of secondary amendment, however, this type of motion is treated as if resolved into its two elements, with the secondary amendment of each element following the rules that would apply to two separate motions for primary amendment. One to strike out, amendable only by striking out, and another to insert, amendable in any of the three forms relating to words. A single secondary amendment involving both elements of primary amendment to strike out and insert is not in order. If a motion to strike out and insert involves enough words that several secondary amendments, particularly to the words to be struck out, might be possible, it is often best to take any amendments to the words to be struck out first, because members who wish to perfect the words to be inserted by secondary amendment may need to know exactly what language those words will replace to be able to perfect them effectively. Amendments to the words to be inserted are then taken up after amendments to the words to be struck out have been disposed of, but the chair should make a judgment depending on the conditions as to whether the assembly wishes to follow this procedure or will find it helpful. In any event, the primary amendment remains open to debate at all times while it is pending, with no secondary amendment pending, and this debate goes into the merits of both parts of the motion viewed as a single whole. While a primary amendment to strike out and insert certain words is pending, and if an admissible secondary amendment to the words to be struck out is introduced and no amendments to the words to be inserted have been proposed, the chair simply proceeds to entertain the secondary amendment, letting debate on the primary amendment resume after the secondary amendment has been dealt with. But the first time that a secondary amendment is to the words to be inserted is offered, assuming a number of amendments to the words to be struck out might be possible, the chair has the option, as described in the preceding paragraph, of saying the chair believes it would be better to follow the procedure of taking any amendments to the words to be struck out first, as permitted under the rules. Accordingly, before entering the amendment just offered, the chair will ask, are there any amendments or further amendments to the words to be struck out? When it appears that no one else wishes to propose an amendment to the words to be struck out, the chair then says, the primary amendment as amended is open to debate, and secondary amendments to the words to be inserted are now in order. After a reasonable opportunity to offer any amendments to the latter type has been given, secondary amendments to either element are in order. When these are in further debate have concluded, the vote is taken on the motion to strike out and insert as it stands after secondary amendment. After a motion to strike out and insert has been adopted, what has been struck out and what has been inserted are subject to the same rules regarding further amendment during the same session, as if the striking out and the inserting had been done by separate motions. The inserted matter cannot be struck out, and the matter that has been struck out cannot be inserted again, except through a reconsideration of the vote on the amendment, or through changes in the wording or the place in a way that permits a new question, under the rules already given for insert or add, and for strike out. If a motion to strike out and insert is voted down, it is still in order to make either of the separate motions to strike out or to insert the same words that would have been struck out or inserted by the combined motion that was lost, or to make another motion to strike out and insert, provided that the change in either the wording to be struck out or the wording to be inserted presents a question materially different from the one that was voted down. When a primary amendment to strike out a passage of any length or complexity and insert a new version is pending, and some members would prefer to insert something different or keep something close to the original, it may be difficult or impossible to reach the desired end by secondary amendment. Situations of this kind can occur especially when the amendment relates to one or more complete sentences that do not constitute an entire paragraph. In such a case, a member should speak against the ending primary amendment and say that if it is rejected, he will offer a new motion to strike out the same passage and insert the version he desires, which he should then state. He should present his case as strongly as possible, because if the first proposed version is inserted, it cannot be changed afterward during the same session except in connection with a different question. As already explained in connection with the rules for the motion to strike out, the motion to strike out and insert can be used to obtain the effect of striking out or modifying separated words. To do this, a member can move to strike out of the resolution a passage long enough to include all of the words to be removed or changed, and insert the revised passage. If several changes in a paragraph are desired, it is usually better to rewrite the paragraph and offer the new version as a substitute, as explained below. Form an example 3a, to strike out and insert applying to words. As an example of a motion to strike out and insert, assume the following resolution is pending. Resolve that the Citizens Association endorse the Rockville site for the new community college. Member A obtained the floor. I move to amend by striking out Roxville and inserting Chatham. Second, it is moved and seconded to strike out Rockville and insert Chatham. If the amendment is adopted, the resolution will be to endorse the Chatham site for the new community college. The question is on striking out Rockville and inserting Chatham. Debate on the amendment is limited to the relative advantages of the two sides. After the amendment is debated, the chair puts it to vote, as in the case already illustrated for insert or add. Debate on the resolution go into the question of whether the association should express approval of any site. 3b. To substitute. A motion to amend by striking out an entire paragraph, section, or article, or a complete main motion or resolution, and inserting a different paragraph or other unit in its place is called a motion to substitute, and the paragraph or resolution to be inserted is said to be offered or proposed as a substitute. A substitute can be offered for a paragraph or a main motion of only one sentence, and in such a case, the paragraph proposed as a substitute can contain several sentences. For the replacement of sentences within a paragraph, see below. A substitute offered for a main motion or resolution, or for a paragraph within a resolution, is a primary amendment and can therefore be moved only when no other amendment is pending. If a motion proposes to replace one or more paragraphs that are involved in a pending primary amendment, it is secondary amendment to which the term substitute is also applicable. Note: it is thus possible to introduce a proposed substitute for a substitute, which cannot be amended, since it is a secondary amendment. Back to reading. A primary amendment to substitute is treated similarly to a motion to strike out and insert as described in 1256 through 68. It is open to debate at all times while it is pending with no secondary amendment pending, and such debate may go fully into the merits of both the original text and the substitute, since this is necessary to determine the desirability of the primary amendment. But for purposes of secondary amendment, the motion to substitute is looked upon as resolved into its two elements, the paragraph to be struck out and the paragraph to be inserted. In contrast to the rules for striking out and inserting words, however, when a motion to substitute is under consideration, the paragraph to be struck out as well as the paragraph to be inserted can be perfected by secondary amendment in any of the three basic forms: inserting or adding, striking out, or striking out and inserting, since this is a procedure with either of the separate motions to insert or to strike out is applied to the paragraph. As in the case of motion to strike out and insert words, the chair has the option of accepting only amendments to the paragraph to be struck out first, and then only amendments to the proposed substitute, thereafter accepting either type of secondary amendment. Following this procedure is likely to be more often indicated in the motion of a case to substitute. More often indicated in the case of a motion to substitute, particularly if a substitute issue hangs on such a motion, as in the example given below. After all secondary amendments have been disposed of and any further debate on the motion to substitute, the vote is taken on whether to make the substitution. For replacing an unbroken part of a paragraph, when the part to be replaced consists of or contains one or more complete sentences, there is an option between offering the amendment as a motion to strike out the part and insert the new matter, that is a motion to strike out and insert, or removing it in the form of a substitute for the entire paragraph with only the desired part change. Either of these motions, as applied to the same case, will present substantially the same question when it is made, but the effect of each of them is different as permissible secondary amendment. If much of the paragraph is involved in such cases, it is generally better to offer the desired amendment in the form of a substitute. If this method is used, however, secondary amendment can also involve the portion of the paragraph in which no change was proposed initially. In taking the vote on whether to make the substitution, the chair should first read both the paragraph of the original text and the proposed substitute, as they stand at the time as amended. Even if the entire resolution or main motion is replaced, adopting the motion to substitute only amends the resolution, which remains pending as amended. After a paragraph, section, or version of a resolution has been submitted for another, the substituted paragraph or resolution cannot be amended during the same session except by adding something that does not modify the paragraph's existing content, as is true of any paragraph that has been inserted. The paragraph that has been replaced cannot be inserted again during the same session unless a new material change in the wording, or possibly the place, makes a new question, as is true of any paragraph that has been struck out. If motion to substitute is lost, the Assembly has decided only that the paragraph proposed to substitute shall not replace the one specified. The same proposed new paragraph can still replace a different one, or can simply be inserted. On the other hand, the paragraph that was retained in the resolution can be further amended or struck out if it is not the entire resolution, or it still can be replaced by a different substitute. When a question is being considered by paragraph seriatim, chapter 28, it is in order to move a substitute for any paragraph or section at the time that the paragraph or section is open to amendment, but it is not in order to move a substitute for the entire document until all the paragraphs or sections have been individually considered and the point is reached when the chair announces that the entire paper is open to amendment. If a resolution is referred to a committee while a primary amendment or a primary and secondary amendment are pending, the committee can report by recommending a substitute for the resolution, even though the substitute cannot become pending until the other amendments have been voted on in their normal order. Thus, when a committee has so reported, the chair first states the question on the secondary amendment that was pending when the resolution was committed, puts the secondary amendment to vote, and then continues with the primary amendment to which it applied. As soon as this primary amendment is disposed of, the chair states the question on the substitute recommended by the committee, and proceeds as he would with any other motion to substitute. In a similar way, if a resolution is referred to a committee while a substitute and a secondary amendment, either to the original or to the substitute, are pending, the committee can report in favor of either version with any desired recommendation as to secondary amendment, or the committee can recommend rejection of the pending substitute and propose a new substitute in its place. In all such cases, the chair starts with the primary parliamentary situation as it was when the resolution was committed, but that he then proceeds as with any motion to substitute and states the question on any new amendment recommended by the committee as soon as it is in order for that amendment to be pending under the usual rules. The motion to substitute often provides a convenient and time-saving method for handling a poorly framed resolution, or for introducing a different and better approach to the real question raised by a main motion. While changes by separate amendments are in progress, a member who feels that he has a better solution by substitution can indicate its features briefly and announce his intention of offering the substitute as soon as no other amendment is pending. If the member wishing to propose the substitute thinks it appropriate, he can try to bring the pending amendments to an immediate vote by moving the previous question on them. An amendment in the form of a substitute can also be used to defeat or work against the purpose of the measure originally introduced. Such a stratagem can be utilized with a view either to converting the measure into a weakened form before its final adoption, or to substituting a motion that is likely to be rejected in the final vote. It should be noted that a vote in favor of a substitute for an entire resolutionary motion is ordinarily a vote to kill any provisions of the original version that are not included in the substitute. Properly applied, the rules for the treatment of motions to substitute automatically operate in fairness to both sides when there is disagreement as to the preferability of the original or the substitute. Under the procedure initially accepting amendments to each element of the primary amendment exclusively, which is generally indicated whenever such disagreement exists, the proponents of the original version are first given the opportunity to amend their proposition into a more acceptable form in the light of conditions revealed by the introduction of the substitute. When this process is correctly handled as described in 1261 through 62 and 1270 through 71, it tends to ensure that the provisions of the version first offered receive appropriate consideration without impeding free debate of the proposal of the substitute. Furthermore, by the requirement that internal amendment of the substitute be done before the vote on the motion to make the substitution, the members are protected from having to decide whether to reject the original version without knowing what may fully replace it. Form an example 3b to substitute. As an example of a motion to substitute, assume that the following resolution is pending. Resolve that the Parish Federation undertake the construction and equipping of a new service wing for the parish house, to be financed as far as possible by a mortgage on the present building. Debate points strongly to a need for further investigation, but many members are determined to secure immediate authorization. The meeting seems evenly divided, and the outcome is unpredictable. Member A obtaining the floor. I move to substitute for the pending resolution the following. Resolve that the parish board be directed to engage appropriate professional consultants to make a survey of and prepare a complete report on the need, probable cost, feasible methods of financing, and maintenance of a new service wing for the parish house. Second. It is moved and seconded to amend by substituting for the pending resolution the following, and then reading the substitute submitted by Member A. The motion to substitute proposes that the resolution just read shall come before the Assembly in place of the pending resolution. After some debate, Member L, who favors the pending resolution and is therefore opposed to the motion to substitute, obtains the floor. I move to amend the proposed substitute by adding the words within 20 days. Second. Chair. The chair believes it will be preferable to take any amendments to the pending resolution first, as permitted under the rules. Such amendments, if adopted, will affect the wording in which the pending resolution will come to a final vote if the motion to substitute fails. Note: if the members are familiar with this procedure for handling motions to substitute, the chair may omit this sentence back to reading. Accordingly, before entertaining the amendment just offered, the chair will call for any amendments to the pending resolution, which he will first reread. The pending resolution is as follows. Resolved that the Parish Federation undertake the construction and equipping of a new service wing for the parish house, to be financed as far as possible by a mortgage on the present building. Are there any amendments to the pending resolution? Member X obtains the floor. I move to amend the pending resolution by striking out everything after the word undertake and inserting the words a campaign to raise funds for the construction and equipping of a new service for the parish house. Second. The chair states the question on this amendment, making its effect clear, and after debate puts it to a vote. For purposes of the example, assume that the proponents of the original resolution differ on the amendment, some voting for it, others opposing it. Also, since the adoption of this amendment presumably would make the pending resolution less objectionable to those who feel that the proposed project is presently ill-advised and who therefore hope that the substitution will be made, most of these members probably vote for the amendment. Assume that it is adopted. The chair notes the result as follows. The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. The pending resolution now reads, resolved that the Parish Federation undertake a campaign to raise funds for the construction and equipping of a new service wing for the parish house. The question is on the motion to substitute, and then there's further debate on the relative merits of the pending resolution and the proposed substitute. Member L, who, again, favors the pending resolution, obtains the floor. I move to amend the substitute by adding within 20 days. Second. Before entertaining the amendment just offered, the chair will again ask, are there any further amendments to the pending resolution? There being none, it is moved and seconded to amend the proposed substitute by adding the words within 20 days. If the amendment is adopted, the substitute will read, resolved that the parish house be directed to engage that the parish board be directed to engage appropriate professional consultants to make a survey of and prepare a complete report on the needed probable costs, feasible methods of financing, and maintenance of a new service wing for the parish house within 20 days. The question is on amending the proposed substitute by adding the words within 20 days. Brief debate shows the proposed survey could not be properly carried out in 20 days. Assume that this amendment is voted down. Member B, who is in favor of the motion to substitute but fears it will fail unless some time limit is specified, obtains the floor. I move to amend the substitute by adding within 60 days. Second, the chair states the question on this amendment and, after brief debate, puts it to vote. Assume that the amendment is adopted, and in announcing the result, the chair continues. The ayes have it, the amendment is adopted. The proposed substitute now reads, resolved that the parish board will be directed to engage, for the parish house within 60 days. Are you ready for the question on the motion to substitute? After further amendment of the proposed substitute, the chair says, are there any further amendments to the proposed substitute? There being none, it is now in order to offer amendments either to the pending resolution or to the proposed substitute. When all debate and secondary amendments has concluded, the chair puts to a vote the motion to substitute. Both resolutions are read, usually by the chair, the pending resolution first, and then the resolution proposes the substitute. The question is on the motion to substitute. The chair will read the pending resolution first, then the resolution proposes the substitute. The pending resolution is resolved that the Parish Federation undertake a campaign to raise funds for the construction and equipping of a new service wing for the parish house. The resolution proposed as a substitute is resolved that the parish board be directed to engage appropriate professional consultants to make a survey of and prepare a complete report on the needed probable costs, etc., within 60 days. The question is, shall the resolution last read be substituted for the pending resolution? Those in favor of the motion to substitute say aye, those opposed say no. The chair announces the result of the vote and states the question on whichever resolution is left pending as follows. The ayes have it, and the motion to substitute is adopted. The question is now on the resolution, and then read the resolution directing the employment of professional consultants. Or, the noes have it, and the motion to substitute is lost. The question is now on the resolution about the fundraising campaign. Regardless of which resolution is now pending, there may be further debate. If the motion to substitute has been adopted, the resolution now pending is in the position of paragraph that has been inserted, and it can no longer be amended during the same session except by adding non-modifying matter. On the other hand, if the motion to substitute has been lost, the resolution for the fund drive can be further amended, but in determining whether an amendment now offered presents a new question can therefore be amended during the same session, account must be taken of any motions to amend that were voted on before the motion to substitute was introduced or while it was pending. Friendly amendments. The term friendly amendments is often used to describe an amendment offered by someone who is in sympathy with the purposes of the main motion, in the belief that the amendment will either improve the statement or effect of the main motion, presumably to the satisfaction of its maker, or will increase the chance of the main motion adoption. Regardless of whether or not the maker of the main motion accepts the amendment, it must be open to debate and voted on formally, unless adopted by unanimous consent, and is handled under the same rules as amendments generally. See 33:11-19. Filling blanks. Filling blanks, although not a form of amendment in itself, is a closely related device by which an unlimited number of alternative choices for a particular specification in a main motion or primary amendment can be pending at the same time, and in fact it permits an exception to the rule in 1213 that only one primary and one secondary amendment can be pending at a time, and in certain cases it has distinct advantages. In amending by the ordinary method, a maximum of 3 alternatives can be pending at once, and the last one moved must be voted on first. In filling blanks, the number of alternatives is not limited. Members have an opportunity to weigh all choices before voting and to vote on them in a fair and logical manner. Among cases adapted to such treatment are main motions or primary amendments containing names of persons or places, dates, members, or amounts. The basic procedure for filling blanks is as follows. After a blank in a pending motion has been created by any of the methods described below, members suggest alternatives to fill the blank, and these are stated by the chair. When debate on the suggestions has ended, or if the pending motion is undebatable when no more suggestions are offered, the assembly decides by majority vote which suggestion or suggestions shall fill the blank. The vote that fills the blank does not decide the question that contained the blank. As soon as the blank has been filled, the chair states the question on the adoption of the completed motion, which remains pending. Creating a blank. A blank to be filled can be created in one of 3 ways. A member can offer a motion or amendment containing a blank. For example, resolve that large number 432 renovate the headquarters of the cost not to exceed blank. Or an amendment to the main motion can propose to add provided that estimates be received on or before blank. B, a member can move that a blank be created. For example, assume that the pending resolution is resolved that lodge number 432 renovate the headquarters of the cost not to exceed $300,000. Any member can move to create a blank by striking out the pending resolution the sum $300,000. If such a motion is adopted, the specification struck out to create the blank automatically becomes one of the proposals filling it, as $300,000 in the example. Although the motion to create a blank may appear to resemble a motion to amend by striking out and inserting, it is in fact an incidental motion, see 615. It is not in order to create a blank in the motion on which the previous question has been ordered. The motion to create a blank requires a second, but is neither debatable nor amendable. It can also be made and voted on when a primary or secondary amendment relating to the subject specification is pending. For example, assuming the same pending resolution as above, the identical motion to create a blank by striking at 300,000 can be made while a primary amendment to strike at 300,000 and insert 350,000 is also pending. Adoption of the motion to create a blank in such a case before the amendment is voted on disposes of the amendment, which is thereafter ignored, and causes both specifications, one the pending resolution and the corresponding one the amendment, to become proposals for filling the blank, as 300,000, 350,000 in the example. C. The chair can suggest the creation of a blank as follows. The chair suggests creating a blank by striking at 300,000. If there is no objection, a blank will be created. There is no objection, the blank is created. If a member objects, the chair puts the question to a vote, treating the question just as you would treat a motion to create a blank made as described above. Making suggestions to fill a blank. When a blank exists or has been created, the chair calls for suggestions by asking them in a manner appropriate to the particular question, such as by asking, how many members shall the committee consist of? Or, in the pending resolution relating to the renovation of the headquarters, the amounts 350,300 and 300,000 have been proposed to fill the blank specifying the maximum cost. Are there any further suggestions? Any number of members can then suggest different names, places, members, dates, or amounts for filling the blank. A member need not be recognized by the chair to make a suggestion unless he or she wishes to speak and debate on it at the same time. See below. No second is required. As soon as a member has made a suggestion, or if the member had obtained the floor, as soon as the member has yielded the floor, the chair repeats the member's suggestion and calls for further suggestions. No members can suggest more than one proposal for filling blank, or in the blank can be filled with multiple suggestions, as a motion to appoint members of the committee, more than the number allowed for in the blank. In the latter case, a member cannot make more than one suggestion at a time if any objection is made, but must wait until after all other members have had the same opportunity to make their suggestions. Debate on the suggestions. Proposals to fill a blank in a debatable motion are debatable. When there is no response to the chair's call for further suggestions, the chair asks, "Are you ready for the question?" or "Is there any debate?" To speak in debate, a member must first be recognized by the chair. The member may then speak in favor of or against the suggestion made previously, or make a new suggestion and speak in favor of it. As a consequence of the rules stated in the preceding paragraphs, debate on the comparative merits of the different suggestions may take place both concurrently with the making of suggestions and after all suggestions have been made. In any event, in this debate, the underlying question is that of choosing the suggestion or suggestions that shall fill the blank, and each member is therefore permitted to speak no more than twice per day on that question, regardless of the number of suggestions made. When no further suggestions are offered and there is no further debate, a vote is taken on the suggestion as described below. Proposals to fill a blank are not amendable. Motions to limit or extend limits of debate for the previous question can be applied to the consideration of suggestions, and when voting on the suggestions has been ordered by adoption of either of these motions, no further suggestions for filling the blank may be made at the time the order goes into effect. However, if a member obtains the floor and moves to the previous question before a reasonable opportunity to make suggestions has been given, the chair must call for suggestions before stating the motion for the previous question. Voting on the suggestions. The suggestions for filling a blank can be voted on by any of the regular methods, C 435 and following, and 44511 and following, in which case each of the proposals is voted on in turn as a separate question. The order in which suggestions are voted on in particular cases is discussed below. As soon as one of the suggestions or the proper number of suggestions that will fill the blank receives a majority vote, the chair declares the blank thereby filled, and no vote is taken on any remaining suggestions. Alternatively, the Assembly may direct that voting be by ballot or roll call, see Chapter 30 and 4518 and following, in which case each member makes or announces his or her preference for the choice or choices that shall fill the blank, which need not be confined to the suggestions previously made, and the blank is filled by the choice receiving a majority of the votes cast, or the proper number of choices receiving a majority that receive the largest number of votes. Compared to 4633. Voting by ballot or roll call is seldom used, except in the case of names, however, unless there is keen competition. For example, among several cities seeking a convention. When names are being voted on, the ballot has an advantage in more truly revealing the will of the voting body. Frequently, when the vote is by voice, those whose names are voted on first are more likely to be elected. It should be noted that the vote that fills the blank does not decide the main question or other pending question that contained the blank. When the blank is filled, the chair must immediately state the question on the adoption of the completed motion. Normally, blanks in a pending motion should be filled before the motion itself is voted on. However, if the pending motion is included in or an adopted order for the previous question, that order must be carried out even if the blank has not yet been filled, and even if no suggestion has been offered. Note, however, that a reasonable opportunity to make suggestions must always be given, see 12101. This may happen, for example, when 2/3 of those voting are confident that the motion will be rejected in any case, but if the motion is actually adopted with an unfilled blank, the Assembly immediately proceeds to fill it, and no new subject, except a privileged one, may be introduced before the motion is thereby completed. Filling blanks by unanimous consent. If no more suggestions are offered than the number required to fill the blank, then unless the voting is to be by ballot or roll call, those suggestions are deemed inserted by unanimous consent, and no vote is taken on inserting them. This procedure is especially common when filling a blank with names, see below. Filling a blank with names. The following principles apply to the process of filling a blank with one or more names. A. The procedure for filling a blank with one name is practically the same as making nominations. The chair repeats each name as it is proposed and finally takes a vote on each name in that same order until one receives a majority. B. If the blank is to be filled with more than one name and no more suggested than required, the names are deemed inserted by unanimous consent. Consider 4640 and 5013b. If more names are suggested than are required, the chair takes a vote on each in the order of its proposal until enough to fill the blank have received a majority vote. The names remaining in the list as proposed are ignored, since the assembly has decided which name shall fill the blank. D. If the number of names is not specified, the chair takes a vote on each name suggested, and all names approved by a majority vote were inserted. Filling a blank with amounts of money. Sometimes the particular nature of the blank determines the order in which proposals for filling it should be put to vote. Typical instances of this kind are blanks to be filled with amounts of money. In such cases, it is advisable, whenever a logical order is apparent, to arrange the proposed entries so that the one least likely to be acceptable will be voted on first, and so on. New supporters may then be gained with each succeeding vote until a majority in favor of one entry is reached. As an example of the procedure for filling a blank with an amount of money, assume that a resolution is to renovate the headquarters at a cost not to exceed blank is pending, and that it is proposed to fill the blank with the following amounts: 350,000, 250,000, 400,000, and 300,000. The character of this measure, to spend money, indicates that the amount should be arranged and voted on in order from the highest to lowest. If 400,000 is rejected, the vote is taken next on 350,000, and if that is not adopted, the chair puts the question on 300,000. If that amount is adopted, no vote is taken on 250,000. The chair immediately says the amount of 300,000 fills the blank. The question is now on the resolution resolved that blah 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 at a cost not to exceed 300,000. Note that if the smallest sum had been voted on first, it might have been adopted, with the result that those who preferred the added advantages possible through a larger expenditure would have been cut off from considering larger sums. On the other hand, suppose that the motion or resolution is to sell the headquarters for an amount not less than blank. In the case of such a motion, to accept a sum of money in settlement, the amounts being considered should be arranged and voted on in order from the smallest to the largest. Thus, those who are willing to sell for the smallest amount and some additional members will be willing to sell for the next larger sum, and so on until the smallest sum for which the majority is willing to settle is reached. Filling a blank with places, dates, or numbers. When a blank is to be filled with a place, date, or number, choice of methods for arranging and voting on the proposals can be made as follows. A. Voting on the suggestions in the order in which they are offered, as when filling a blank with names. B. Voting on the proposals in the order of their probable acceptability, beginning with the least probable choice, as when filling a blank with amount. C. If there is no clear-cut reason why either increasing or decreasing order would be preferable, voting first on the largest number, longest time, or most distant date, and so on. The particular circumstances must determine the order to be used. If an amount has been struck out in order to create a blank, that amount is voted on in its proper place in the logical sequence among the other amounts. If a name has been struck out to create a blank, however, it comes first in the order of names to be voted upon. For further examples of both creating and filling a blank, see 1376, 13.8, 13.12, 13.26, 27.4, and 31.3.